We're going to return to our top story now, the fight against Daesh. And for more on that, we can talk to Galip Dalay, Research Director at the Sharq Forum. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now, let's start with the recent gains in Syria. Dabiq marks a very strategic victory for the rebels. Can you tell us more why?
Well, it is. It is both symbolic and ideological. Actually, if you put aside the symbolic and ideological value of this victory is not different than the other victories that the rebel has been recently scoring against the Daesh. They have been capturing new villages, new towns from the Daesh in the last month or so. Therefore, the recent capture of the Dabiq is important. Because Dabiq was the place. It is also the name of the Daesh English language magazine, and Dabiq was the place that the Daesh believed that the Third World War will take place there, and then the Daesh will emerge victorious from this, and the caliphate will be established. So in this regard, it is a moment, or it's a place from where the process of deconstructing this Daesh ideological or this Daesh symbolic construction to be deconstructed. But other than that, well, it is one more step towards Al-Bab. It's one more step, it's one more step in pushing back the Daesh. But its symbolic and ideological value is much greater than its geopolitical value.
And in Mosul now, crossing to Iraq, the battle for Mosul is expected to be long and difficult. There are an estimated 60,000 members of Daesh in that city. What are troops likely to face there? What will be their main challenges in recapturing Mosul?
Well, right now, we have been getting different numbers regarding the number of the Daesh militants in Mosul, so the numbers varies. But I think the most important challenge will be, and this is also the reason why the Daesh is in Mosul in the first place, is how we are going to conduct a successful military operation, B, a political process at the same time. So therefore, the fight against the Daesh will not also culminate further alienation of the Sunni Arab population in Mosul, where, which will pave the way for search for another radical organization.
Do you think that this is the main challenge of these forces as well? Because we're talking about a massive operation, multiple forces from multiple ethnicities. Do you think that this is going to be the main challenge, to coordinate their efforts
coordinate, but also which will be the basis? For instance, it has taken a while, the discussion around which forces should be allowed to enter the city Mosul, which forces should be allowed to be at the outskirts of the city, and which forces should be allowed to join the operation. And this very much also define what will happen the day after the Mosul is liberated. I don't think that militarily the job is going to be so strong, difficult. I think it can take some time, it can take months, but in the end, militarily Daesh will be defeated there. But the question is that how you are going to manage the day after. And today's preparation and the groups that are going to be allowed to join join this operation, and the structure that you are going to in place will very much define what will happen the day after, and
whether to Iraq.
Exactly, and whether the day after will be a much more uniting factor for Iraq, or whether it will be much more a divisive factor for Iraq.
And just one last question: could the fall of Mosul really mean the end of Daesh in Iraq?
Well, the end of Daesh as a territorial entity in Iraq, yes. But the end of Daesh as an landless terrorist group, it might not, mean the end of the Daesh as a territory without a terrorist group without a territory. But definitely as a territorial entity in Iraq, yes. But again, we should not forget the evolution from Al Qaeda to Daesh. If we are not going to manage the political process well, that will culminate in further alienation of the population, and that will pay for maybe a much more radical terrorist organization. Once we had Al Qaeda, and we thought that, this is the most radical organization. Nothing can be more radical than the Al Qaeda. And then you have Daesh, and you're like, how can, someone surpass Al Qaeda in terms of cruelty and etc. So if we don't manage this political process well, we might tomorrow have another terrorist organization that might be much more cruel, than Daesh himself.
Which is why you're saying that what happens the day after they retake Mosul is so important. Thank you very much for that, Galip Dalay from the Al Sharq Forum.